Previously on Kayla Explains the Pokemon Multiverse.
Each individual save file is also its own parallel universe. We never see a situation where in-universe events can be changed through time travel. Xerneas/Yveltal was a major component in AZ's ultimate weapon. AZ choosing to fire the ultimate weapon or not created a huge split within the Pokemon multiverse. Xerneas suggests that these problems also happen in non-Mega universes as well. Solgaleo and Lunala are able to help people travel through ultra wormholes. Brawlers somehow ended up traversing ultra space without Solgaleo or Lunala to guide them, guiding people who fall off Solgaleo or Lunala or just fall into ultra wormholes in general to a different universe.
Hello, my name's Kayla, this is Cinnamon the Score Bunny, and today we're going to be talking about how other parts of the Pokemon franchise fit into the multiverse. We're going to talk about the anime, the manga, the card game, Pokemon Unite, Pokemon Go, Pokemon Masters, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Pokemon Snap. Yeah, there are kind of a lot of aspects to the Pokemon franchise, but believe it or not, all of their multiverses are connected in some way. Let's start with the anime because that's the one I tend to get the most comments about. The anime isn't super closely related to the games, but if we did have to pick one that it was closest to, I think it's pretty obvious that it's Pokemon Yellow. Just like in Yellow version, Ash starts out with a Pikachu that refuses to go in a Pokeball and also forms a friendship with him over time, despite them not initially getting along. The anime is really hard to figure out in terms of when it takes place because Ash never gets older. Like, there are a ton of jokes about him perpetually being the same age, so it's really impossible to say exactly when the anime takes place, although some of the events from the main series games are included. There's also some interesting things in the main series games, like Ash Greninja and all the Ash Hat Pikachus, kind of suggesting that Ash is a character in the games as well. There's even a photo of what looks like Ash in Sun and Moon in the Haunted Mart, and a suggestion that Pikachu is famous, and that's why Mimikyu is always trying to copy it. So is Ash a real character in the games? Or is Ash kind of like a parallel of Red, since like the Pikachu thing? Or even could Ash be a TV character in Pokemon games? Like literally maybe they watch the anime too? Since all the games take place in separate universes and the anime is incredibly inconsistent, it's really impossible to say. Ash's existence might actually vary depending on the game. Speaking of the anime being inconsistent, it doesn't really follow rules or logic or anything like that when it comes to pretty much everything, whether it's lore, moves, weaknesses, the structure of gyms, and even legendary Pokemon abilities. Like, I know a bunch of you reached out after the first video in this series and said, oh, Dialga is actually able to do time travel in the anime. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's the only time it's able to do that for some reason. The anime is just all over the place. So like, technically it's canon within that universe, but it just causes problems for like everything else in the franchise. There are a ton of episodes and movies in the anime, so obviously I don't have time to talk about every single little detail in all of them, but if there are specific episodes that you guys would like me to review and talk about in terms of how they work within the multiverse, please let me know in the comments so that I can check them out. Moving on to another version of the Pokemon story, going in the exact opposite direction of the anime in terms of tone, the manga. The manga are closer to the games than the anime, but they're much more intense. Things get a lot darker than even in the games. It's a lot more violent. If you're looking for like a more adult version of Pokemon, you should definitely check out the manga. In terms of the timeline of the manga, it's very different from the games. It tends to be in the order that the games came out, rather than with things overlapping, like, you know, Gens 2 and 4. One thing that's different about the manga is that each player character is named and has specific traits and their own storylines. This can help us understand the most common trajectories for different characters because it's the only part of the franchise that doesn't reset like the anime, or take place in entirely separate universes. This is like one of the only things in the franchise that's one cohesive story going from start to finish, so that gives us a lot of information. I wonder how many of you were like, Kayla, the card game is not a universe. But yes, the card game exists within the Pokemon multiverse in a very interesting way. Based on sets having different features from each other, it's very likely that each set of the cards comes from a parallel universe. This means that some of the sets come from the non-Mega timeline, whereas come from the Mega timeline. Each of the sets has some sort of really small description about it, but it seems more like we're taking a snapshot of a moment in space-time and playing with the components of it. Because we're able to interact with the components of the universe directly, we're able to do a lot of crazy things. If we want to go completely rogue, we can even combine cards across different sets. Although we don't want to do that too much because of power creep. Anyways, moving on to Pokemon Unite, which I am super excited to talk about. Pokemon Unite takes place in the non-Mega timeline because none of the Pokemon are able to Mega Evolve. It might be closest to Pokemon Legends Arceus because this picture of a young Professor Forest looks a lot like Adaman, so she might be one of his descendants. In terms of where it fits on the timeline, it might be one of the furthest in the future based on the technology available. It suggested that the different things that Pokemon are wearing are just kind of like holograms, so that's very futuristic. In terms of what it adds to the lore, in Pokemon Unite, Pokemon are able to devolve, so they can actually go backwards in evolution. We know this because at the start of the match, Pokemon always start off in their first form and then evolve as the match goes on. While de-evolution is not a common thing in Pokemon, there was an item in the card game called de-evolution spray, so it's not entirely unheard of, and it's not like Pokemon Unite is the only part of the multiverse that has this. Shadow Pokemon are kind of included in the card game, so Pokemon Coliseum is pretty close to that. You can work with these Pokemon to purify them, and then they're no longer Shadow Pokemon. Pokemon Coliseum takes place in the future. There's a character who looks suspiciously like Misty, and when we meet her grandparents, her grandfather has a Pikachu. This seems to strongly suggest that Red and Misty end up together in some universes. You might be thinking, like I was, that in the games, Red is younger than Misty, but actually, he's like a year older than her. I know, she's supposed to be 10 years old when she's a gym leader. That means when she's on her date on that bridge, she's only 13 years old. I guess that kind of explains her really immature reaction. Shadow Pokemon, specifically Shadow Mewtwo, also make an appearance in Pokken Tournament, but there's not really much to the story of that game, so we're gonna kind of move on. Another game that incorporates Shadow Pokemon, and the next game that we're gonna talk about, is Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is the closest universe to reality because it uses real-world locations. It's kind of like it's always in the present, with it getting updates over time. Another really important thing to the multiverse confirmed by Pokemon Go is that Hoopa's rings are ultra wormholes, not just moving things through space. We know this because in one of the trailers, we actually see Pokemon coming from another reality into our own. There were also Hoopa rings that we were able to see in the sky within the game. As you all know from the previous videos in this series, ultra wormholes connect to other parallel universes. That's how Pokemon are kind of able to go into the world of Pokemon Go. Now, it might not be that Hoopa brought all of the Pokemon that are in Pokemon Go into our reality, but they definitely brought some of them. Speaking of Hoopa, let's talk about Pokemon Masters. Like many of the other side games and other parts of the franchise, Pokemon Masters doesn't entirely match up because the events that are taking place in the game are just very different from what we see in the main series. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially because Pokemon Masters explains why this is happening. One thing to know about Pokemon Masters is that the characters in it are very clearly from separate universes, because they come from different times and they have some slightly different memories every once in a while. The reason for this is actually explained within the game. Hoopa has brought all of these different characters from all of these different parallel universes to this one artificial island. It's honestly a fascinating game because it lets characters interact with each other that normally wouldn't really be able to because of their ages, which provides a lot of background info on these characters. While the versions of these characters that we know from the main series games might be slightly different, they probably have so much in common with the characters that we see in Pokemon Masters that they're basically the same. So we can take information from Pokemon Masters to find more bits and pieces of lore about the different human characters in the Pokemon games. Speaking of people going from one universe to another, let's talk about Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Also, disclaimer, I've never played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon all the way through, so if I'm wrong about some things, let me know. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is probably closest to the anime, since some episodes in the anime translate the Pokemon language into human language, which is a huge feature in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. The timeline seems to be totally different since there are basically no humans, but it says that humans tried to crash the planet into the sun? Makes sense that humans won the Darwin Award in this universe. Like in Pokemon Legends Arceus, the main character in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is a faller. The opening cutscene of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is actually very similar to the opening cutscene of Pokemon Legends Arceus. As a reminder, fallers are people who travel from one universe to another through an ultra wormhole. Sometimes these universes are set in different times, allowing people to fall from the future or the past. Common traits of fallers is that they typically land on beaches and suffer from memory loss. This is exactly the case for the main character in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. However, unlike other fallers, this character changes from a human into a Pokemon when they fall. This is because the universe they fall into doesn't have a lot of humans, so they're changed into a Pokemon so that they can match with the others around them. Another interesting thing is that it's suggested that Darkrai is the Pokemon that opened the Ultra Wormhole to bring you here, so that's fascinating because, you just need infinity energy to open up ultra wormholes. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific Pokemon. As long as they have enough infinity energy, they're technically able to do that. I mean, we even see humans opening ultra wormholes like with the link cable and Lucamine, so it's definitely not a very limited thing. The fact that Darkrai is able to open an ultra wormhole proves that it's the Pokemon's infinity energy, not necessarily their biology or anything like that, that allows them to open up these wormholes. Next up is Pokemon Snap. It's in the non-Mega timeline, which is fascinating because Xerneas features heavily in the game. Xerneas doesn't usually feature in the story in the non-Mega timeline. The Kalos region has actually only shown up in the Mega timeline. It also matches up closely with the anime, which features Todd Snap, who's the main character in Pokemon Snap. The first Pokemon Snap game most likely takes place parallel to Red, Blue, Yellow, and Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, when Todd Snap is about 10. In the new game, he's probably less than 23 because he's significantly older. I know that's a very specific number, but let me explain. In the Mega timeline, we know that either Mega Rayquaza stops the meteor or it is sent to another Hoenn, basically destroying that world because it doesn't have Mega Evolution and also probably has to deal with its own meteor. But regardless of what happens in the Mega timeline, the meteor still falls in the non-Mega timeline. And some non-Mega universes definitely survive because we have Black, White, Black 2, and White 2, which would likely take place after the meteor if it falls at the same time in the non-Mega timeline. We see from new Pokemon Snap that in the past of the non-Mega timeline, Xerneas stopped a meteor from destroying the planet. Based on the end of the Pokemon Snap sequel, Xerneas is preparing to stop a meteor again. So assuming the meteor falls at the same time in both universes, Pokemon Snap 2 probably takes place somewhere in this time period. The region is also probably pretty close to Hoenn because it's suggested that the meteor is going to fall right there. This is super cool because we had no knowledge of what happens in Kalos and also what happens with the meteor in the non-Mega timeline. Pokemon Snap 2 offered a really interesting explanation for both of these things. Does kind of make me wonder what's happening with Lysandre in the non-Mega timeline though. If you're curious on my thoughts on that, there'll be a link to a theory video at the end of this one. So the moral of today's episode is that every single part of the Pokemon franchise relates to the Pokemon multiverse in some way, even if the connection between them isn't as obvious as the main series games. Hopefully this video helped you understand how all of these different parts of the franchise connect. In the next video of this series, I'm going to be putting together a timeline of events across all of these different universes. Obviously, this is going to get super complicated. There's going to be some branching timelines depending on if it's Mega or non-Mega, but I'm gonna do my best to find the most canon, the most common timeline. If you learned something new, leave a like, subscribe, and share this video around. Bye. Powder, I know you're antagonizing him. Oh, you're trying to be sweet? Oh, did you choose love? Nope, you chose violence.